Thank you. I'll turn my video on here for a second to say hi before I start the presentation. I don't know if my video is working here, but hello. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to turn the video off and then just focus on the presentation if you don't mind. So thanks for coming. It feels kind of weird to be at a Futurist Summit. I have my own conference that I do for that caters to futurism and speculative design that I rarely talk at all futurist conferences. It's kind of a weird thing. I don't want to repeat too much of what you've probably already heard today, things like the Futures Code and other frameworks, but I'll give you my perspective on this term futures design thinking that I've been trying to investigate for how we can use strategic foresight methodologies and frameworks, speculative design, and design thinking to craft strategies for today so that we can be prepared for the challenges and opportunities. Okay, so first I want to acknowledge all the essential service workers and healthcare workers. We can't thank them enough. We don't see the work that they're doing other than when they come to the door or when they're in helping critical care. But there's a lot of people in the background doing a lot of work that are out there and risking their lives amongst the virus, and they're doing such a great job and being so resilient. So I want to continue to honor them and say thank you. So like I said, I don't want to give the same like 101 talk that I typically do when I usually speak. I'm giving a primer of strategic foresight and speculative design, and I'm showing a lot of examples and videos. But today I'm going to just kind of tell you a little bit about my story and how I got to having an interest in futurism. This is basically my history, my career path. My first degree is a Bachelor of Arts in Graphic Design. I was trained in print, and even before I graduated from undergrad, I had an interest in web and web design. So I started doing coding my own web pages, and I started my own consultancy, building websites and e-commerce sites for friends and colleagues. And then I did a little bit of work in a nonprofit government space. I was working for an interactive firm that catered specifically to nonprofits. And then I moved to San Francisco. I was born and raised in Virginia, went to school in Maryland, worked in DC, moved to San Francisco in 2007, looking for more exciting work. And I did a lot of work around kiosks. I'm calling it kiosk, but it's really a robotic vending machine. I'll show you that in a second. And after that, I was sort of still hungry and trying to figure out what design was. I've always been searching for, what is the craft and trying to be good at it and build my career. So I worked for a number of startups trying to learn how to do mobile apps and iPad apps and desktop apps, and trying to figure out all of the different modalities and platforms, and trying to figure out interaction design for every type of platform. And then I was at GE for about 4.5 years working on industrial internet applications, basically building dashboards for big machines like aviation, like jet engines and power plants. And then most recently I joined McKinsey doing digital consulting, helping companies with their digital transformations and building digital products. But I'm going to focus or start at 2009 when I was pursuing my master's at California College of the Arts. I knew I had an interest in the future. I just always liked science fiction, but I didn't really know how to use it in design. And at CCA, you have to do a thesis, and I was looking for my thesis topic. And at the time I was working for this company, you might have seen these machines at airports and train stations. The machine itself is built by a company called Zoom Systems, and brands would come in and skin it and put their products in it. So there's a robotic arm in there that gets the machine. It's all proprietary, and that little user interface was what I did. I was the designer of the interface, and I got to do a couple of other things like video and the video loop in the TV, and I gave some input on some of the graphic design on the outside. This is another brand that we worked with, Proactive Solutions. So this was the most popular concept, big in Japan. We had a huge network in Japan. and partially because we believe that teenagers who needed skincare could kind of go to these machines very discreetly. At the time, you couldn't get these skincare products except through the internet or calling a number and these machines, so that they could just walk up to it and discreetly buy it. So in 2009, I was trying to figure out what my thesis was, and I felt if I'm going to investigate the future, where else should I go other than Japan? I felt like Tokyo was like always like the future, and you know, I was a really big fan of anime and Akira, and so I asked my company to send me to Japan to do some research, and I spent a month there, 2 weeks doing research to figure out how we could improve the user experience of this vending machine, and I spent 2 weeks just kind of roaming the country. And I went down to Hiroshima and Kyoto and Nara and Osaka and back up to Tokyo, just trying to wander and figure out what it is I want to focus my thesis on. And then I discovered this. So at the time, this machine, built by a company called Acure, A-C-U-R-E, launched, and it was a smart vending machine. There's a camera that was reading people's faces and basically logging all the different types of people that were buying drinks from it and trying to understand who bought what drinks when. So if it was like 5 p.m. and you looked like every other, you know, 5'8" man with dark hair and you looked a little bit tired, it would suggest coffee. So it was using machine learning. And to me, that was this profound idea that something as simple and consumer as the vending machine had an AI built into it. And it was then that kind of sparked the interest in trying to understand the implications of technology and emerging technology in the future and what that meant. I did a lot of research and watched a documentary called Objectified. And they interview Anthony Dunn and Fiona Raby, who were, they were professors at the Royal College of Art and the sort of founders or coiners of the term critical design. And this is really fascinating to me. This project was about robots of the future, and they don't look like your typical robot that's anthropomorphic, but it questioned the interactions, the emotions, the sort of autonomy and intelligence of the machines and the form. And that, at first, the interaction part of it was what fascinated me, but then I also really realized that this is a really interesting way of looking into the future, dreaming up possibilities and then figuring out what the implications are and figuring out, are these machines that we can build and we should build, or what are the potential challenges or negative implications around it. I did a lot of roaming in those early years and built a lot of things and probes, and this was a identity visualizer. I was really interested in digital identity, and basically I took the credit card reader off of the vending machine, and when you scan any type of card with a magnetic strip, it would create this kaleidoscope of colors, which was basically a visualization of all the numbers that are encoded onto the card. And starting to unpack what identity meant, how do you visualize it? You know, what are the sort of facets and characteristics of it, and what could we do with identity in the future? This is another simple installation that I built. It's basically very simple code using MaxMSP. It just scrapes the internet for all the images and text related to a name. And I had this big idea of like having RFID, and people would, you know, be able to scan themselves and see everything about them that's on the internet. But it was too complex for me, and I had to get some help to build the interface. But we had this mapping thing, so when you walked into a room, you type your name in, it would scrape everything and then project it on the wall, and it would sort of follow you around. A literal idea of like your identity following, the history, your digital history following you around the space. And it all kind of, you know, I had to come up with a framework. You know, when you're doing your master's, you have to be, you know, very investigative and come up with a bunch of stuff and use a lot of big words. And this is the framework or the idea that I was really thinking about, of how like data is being captured by multiple sources and rearrange and categorize, and there's something on the other end, whether it be a human or a machine that's processing for some information. And I built a couple of different responses. I did a short film, which was terrible. It was more of an art film, but yeah, a number of things. This is a screenshot from the film Futures, which I titled it. I always wanted to produce a film. So I used, the thesis to do that. And it follows 3 lives in the future. It doesn't say, it's not clear when, but all of them are sort of impacted by digital identity mediating systems. This is Maya, who has sort of lost her identity and goes to this library where identities are kept, and she's trying to find a new type of identity to absorb. The technology of how that happens, that it didn't really matter. The concept of like, could we like commodify or objectify identity and use it for different purposes? It's the cover of the book. You can find this if you dig around, but it's very artsy, yeah, I think there's a book somewhere. Okay, so let's talk about speculative design. I've been using this definition, and I made it up. I kept on trying to abstract it, but I don't think it does a good job of abstracting it and explaining it in a very simple sense. But this is how I try to think about it. It's a way to manifest possibilities. It's sort of a vehicle for building responses to future challenges, and also giving you the ability to prepare yourself for the inconvenient challenges, such as the current crisis. And then it's also a vehicle to design responsible paths into the future and try to really understand all the possibilities and just try to be as prepared as possible. We do this through creation of diegetic prototypes. Diegetic prototypes are like props. I hate to use the word props because it makes it feel like it's fake, but when we create these artifacts of the future, they're basically there to provoke a response. They can become a North Star for people to build towards, or they can be representative challenges, non-perfable futures that we don't want. The futures count. I don't know how many of you have been attending the summit, and I don't know how many other speakers have mentioned the futures cone. I keep using different ones. This one, I took this version from What the Foresight by Alita Drutt, which is a great book on personal futures, by the way, just because it was pretty. And this is how we start when we explain foresight, futures, or speculative design, that there are many futures in the future that are possible, alternate futures, and it's a range of places where you can investigate and play. So I'll show you a couple of examples that are representative of speculative and critical design. Some of them are very conceptual and some of them very practical. This is one of my favorite pieces by Aggie Haynes. Aggie Haynes graduated from RCA, where Dun and Raby were teaching, and this one's called Transfigurations. This is a child that's been modified for hotter temperatures and to be able to work longer hours. The skin, the folds in the skin, there's more surface area so that it can dissipate heat more. It's sort of like a heat sink in a computer. The more surface area there is, the more space there is for the heat to escape. So this child is designed to live in a different environment than today, but it's just a prop. It's not a real child. This is just an artifact or a provocation. And it starts to provoke questions of like, should we do this? How could we do this if we wanted to? This is a project by Iwan Nowak, came out recently. These are jewelry or devices to sort of deter facial recognition, trying to find a way to deal with that technology, but also have it be somewhat stylish and cosmetic. Alexandra Daisy Ginsburg, also from the RCA, she's very interested in bacteria for this project, Synthetic Kingdom. On the left is a cup made of keratin. Keratin is it's the protein that gives your hair nail structure. And on the right is a pollution sensing lung tumor. So it's made of glass fabricating bacteria, I think, and it glows red when it's in the presence of toxic chemicals. So there's some use to it, and it's based on real science. But we start to speculate how could we use this? Here's one manifestation of it, but then there's the ethical challenges of like where do those cells come from? And this is one of my favorite quotes by Alexandra Daisy Ginsburg. Design can set agendas and not necessarily be in service, but used to find ways to explore our world. So speculative design gets a bad rap sometimes because it's hard to define its ROI, its immediate return on investment. And, you know, it doesn't have to be immediately useful. It can be a way to set a new agenda, to, you know, create a vision of the future and change agendas and priorities and strategies to you know, move towards that future. So they can be very useful. I'm not going to play that video, but because of the internet, videos don't work very well on or a conference. But I'm going to show you a couple of other projects. This one's called Maiden Levy. He won the Speculative Design Award for Core 77 awards last year, and you know, this project is it's beautiful. Basically, he's come up with a new way of basically fabricating fruit, a 4D technology, basically using silicon and actual fruit. And the technology is you know, it's not entirely real, but he's trying to reconnect man with the beauty of nature and food. And it doesn't necessarily challenge the status quo or have some, you know, striking message about it, but they're really beautiful pieces. And it starts to imagine a different vision of food and how we can actually manufacture it and pay attention to certain details. Really beautiful pieces. And he has this really great video that's sort of a marketing video, and you should check it out. The videos, it's hard to tell if it's real or not. It's very like contemporary. It's got this like really jazzy soundtrack. It's got, you know, these women eating these fruits as if they really are real. And, you know, the methods for marketing speculative design can be vast. And, you know, he did a pretty good job in making it realistic and feeling like it's a real thing. This next project, and I always like to show this one, it's called the Apple Knowledge Navigator. You should check it out online. It's about a 7-minute video, but basically this was Apple's vision for this this technology, basically this tablet. And the story, the video is this professor, and he's talking to the tablet, and there's a little butler here. And he starts, you know, he's talking to the assistant, and he's getting the assistant to like pull up information and data and graphs and stuff. But the important thing about this project in 1987, sorry, is it was basically a North Star for them. In 1987, things like the internet, webcams, digital assistants, even touchscreen tablets didn't exist yet. But they knew it was coming, and they were able to identify those signals and emerging technology early enough and understand how they could use that and create this product. So this product is very robust, and the video shows a lot of different features of the product, but it was you know, a fake piece. And you can see, you know, there's a camera, touchscreen, and just the ability for it to connect to the internet and pull information was completely new and unheard of at that point. Well, the internet was not commercially available at that time, but this is a consumer product. So we don't know if this was the ongoing North Star that led to the iPad, but you can see through the products that have come out over the last 20 years that they've basically realized this product. Vision videos are very useful for telling story. It creates a narrative for people to understand you know, this future that you're trying to pay for them. Google Selfish Ledger was an internal video created by someone over at Google X, and it was I think it's got like 4 or 5 chapters, and it has different variations of what the ledger or the AI could do. And there's one of the chapters is about the ledger not knowing a piece of information of its user, and the piece of information it doesn't know is their weight. How much do they weigh? So it's able to go autonomously through all of its users' social media and preferences and design the scale and 3D print it for them and basically sell it to the user so that it can, so the user would probably buy it. It, you know, designs it in the style that the user likes and the price point the user likes. And once you purchase the scale, then the ledger can get the weight from the scale. So a lot of people, you know, reacted, were very surprised by this video. They didn't know if it was real or not, but it was just a design fiction piece meant to provoke ideas, possibilities, or, you know, challenges things you might want to do or might not want to do, or you might want to be careful of. This is Hyperhuman by IDEO. This is a project they did last year, all around AI. This is the belief checkout. So what if there was the checkout that basically recommended products based on your moral code? So it would just, understand through your social data, your ethics and your moral code, and suggest products that are healthy and sustainable and local and, align with your beliefs. So I'm going to talk very quickly about some frameworks, and these are some basic frameworks. We are, I think in general, the design community is the ones that are interested in foresight and speculative design. We are trying to figure out how do we market it and sell it and socialize it internally. And this is my approach. There are many other ways of doing this, and I think that the important thing is to try and simplify it and abstract it so that people can understand its value very quickly and how to do it very quickly. And there's so many frameworks out there. So I'm just going to talk about 3. Strategic foresight, which is a massive discipline, and there's lots of frameworks and methodologies there, and lots of analysis tools. Speculative design doesn't necessarily have a double diamond or a specific framework for how you do speculative design. I mean, good speculative design will take into consideration a lot of different factors and inputs and trends and craft it based on science and imagination. And then for all of this stuff to really become actionable, we have to have some kind of alignment or strategy at the end of it. We imagine the future, we tell you all about the things that we think we should care about, but how do we prepare the present and create a strategy today, a new agenda. So this is a framework that we did recently, me and a small team at McKinsey. We have a newsletter that we do, and this is how we're trying to pitch it internally to our internal design community, is creating these newsletters. They're very easy to do. It's a platform for experimentation. We've done 2 so far, but we investigate a couple of different trends and signals, and we come up with some products and ecosystems. And the second volume, we included this framework. So this isn't by any means like the right framework, it's just a framework. What we try to do is use the design thinking phases just to show that it's very similar to design thinking, except for the outputs are in a different time horizon. So you still do research, you still create concepts and create designs, and then you come up with some sort of strategy to execute on those designs or that path. The research looks very similar. We talk to experts. We use some frameworks like STEEP, the social, technological, economical, environmental, and political climate of a particular time. We look at trends and we try to figure out where trends are going. There's a lot of trend resources out there. We used the Future Today Institute for this newsletter, and it had all these trends on AI and robotics and input technologies, and they're a really good foundation for how do we craft the world. And we're using the term world building a lot. World building is a term used in authoring science fiction. You basically build a world for the reader, and you can build any kind of world. Build the actors, the laws, the environment, all that stuff, and you can use things like STEEP to help build that world. And once you build that world for people to live in the future, you have to basically create that for them. That's when you can start to create the products and design responses in that world. But the rest of it is just like any other design process. You're creating prototypes, you're testing it with people to see what they think about it. And then hopefully you've created some kind of strategy to move towards there. So STEEP, you'll probably hear this a lot. There's a lot of foresight speakers at the summit. The futures wheel is a common one that we use. You just put a trend or a signal in the middle, and then you draw these circles on the outside. The first concentric circle from the trend is a direct implication. So, what's the direct implication of autonomous cars? We don't have to drive anymore. The indirect implication is we might start to forget, how to drive. It becomes like we sort of de-evolve, or that process starts to disappear from our society. But you can use that to start to look at all of the challenges and indirect impacts of events or signals. And here's backcasting. So backcasting is very traditional planning method, but here I've placed the backcasting on top of the futures cone. So if you have multiple futures, positive, negative, multiple markets you want to get into, you put those out into the future to create that time horizon, and then you backcast into the present. And along the way, you basically have these milestones and phases, and you decide what are the things that are necessary for these futures to become real. Infrastructures, policies, whatever it might be. And, it's not always a clean, path forward sometimes. And because the time changes, all kinds of things happen, and future is very unpredictable. So it might end up being a very zigzaggy way to that future. So talk real quick about DFI. This is a nonprofit that we started. Basically, I was very fascinated with speculative design. Very quickly after discovered strategic foresight, started a meetup in San Francisco in 2015, and it sort of grew from there. But the organization that sort of organizes and produces the events in the community is called DFI, Design Futures Initiative. And we do three things. We have the primer conference in the US and Europe, speculative futures meetups around the world, and then we have our own programs that we're starting to do. Just to give you an idea of how much we've grown, or the community has grown. And again, it's not just our community. I think we're just sort of there providing a platform and connecting people. In 2018, we had 6 chapters. In 2020, as of yesterday, I did a count. We have about 44. We are now in Nigeria, Iran, Pakistan, some of these other areas that we've been wanting to get into. But a very, very big community in Europe and Latin America, and it's growing very fast. And we're trying to figure out how do we keep things organized, keep people connected, and be a platform for everyone and support everybody as much as possible. So we are going to have Primer. Primer is our conference, and it was meant to be sort of the annual gathering of the speculative futures community meetups. But it's a full-fledged conference now. It was supposed to be in Atlanta at the end of June, but of course, due to the pandemic, we're going to cancel the in-person conference, but we're going to shift to a virtual format, just like everyone else. But we're trying to come up with a couple of different offerings and ways you can access content. We're probably going to spread it out a little bit and not just cram it into 1 or 2 days. We're trying to be creative about how we provide this content, and also be mindful of everyone's exhaustion of being on Zoom conferences and being in lockdown, and try to create something that people want to access. It's a picture of the Primer EU Madrid team. It was in Madrid last year. So we are going to do a Primer EU. We're talking with the team. We were planning it for the fall of this year, but I think we're going to shift that strategy. And I can't say anything yet because we haven't settled on anything, but we're going to be shifting it based on the current state. I'm going to talk real quick about the Boys and Girls Club. This is one of our programs, and it's a program we started about a year ago. And basically the idea was, how could we use the futures frameworks to help us identify, help youth identify life, career, and social challenges, and design better life pathways as they move into adulthood. And it was just basically a hypothesis. We thought, how else can we use these futures methodologies, and who are different types of people that we can teach it to, where it would be useful. So we did this, some research with the kids at this group, and basically asked them, if you had all the money in the world, what would you try to solve? And this child said racism. And they're dealing with they're impacted by some very trying and contemporary issues. Well, issues, I don't want to say contemporary, but like things that we feel like they're more impactful for adults, but they're impacted by it, but they have, they're sort of influenced by their peers and what they're seeing in the media, and they could use a little bit of, I don't want to say it's training, but other sort of ways of looking at problems, understanding them, and designing better paths into the future using these frameworks. And so we've designed this program. I mean, it's just a series of workshops basically, and trying to instill in it some values and competencies. And these are taken partially from, the Boys and Girls Club's curriculum planning program. So these are the assets that we're installing in the program: positive values, social competence, positive identity, you know, so that it's useful and builds on their moral code. Okay. So this is sort of how it's structured right now. Part of it is a design thinking program where we're looking at teaching them how to understand the problem, ask why, do root cause analysis, problem framing, and really understand what the issues are. And then the other part is using futures frameworks to really think about how do I navigate them and create new futures. And we're adding another layer to it called about mindfulness and gratitude. They're trying to take this program into other places. We're looking at a hospital in Atlanta for disabled youth and dealing with diseases. And you know, we're trying to stretch out and figure out how can we apply this and help other people think about the future in a more positive and constructive way. This is one of the exercises we did where we basically asked them to draw the futures code on the floor, and each student was asked to represent different points in this person's life, both the good preferable future and the non-preferable future. And we had them standing on the timeline, and they had to kind of come up with like, what happens to Joe and his farm? If his farm is dying because the bee population is dying, how does Joe's life change, both positive and negative? And then, you know, it gave them a chance to be creative and come up with really interesting stories. And then it also gave them ideas for how do we shift these negative outcomes into positive outcomes, because some things are imminent and you can't change them. They said things like, oh, what if, you know, Joe's parents get a divorce? Well, how are we going to deal with that? You can't necessarily like fix the divorce, but we can try and like, you know, redirect some of that energy into education or, you know, some kind of mindfulness. So they came up with all these stories, and we play this game of bringing, you know, Joe's life from the bad place into the good place and creating new futures. We did an ethics workshop where we talked about things like war and student loans and autonomous cars. This is I'm going to call it a riddle, but basically the challenge question of like, if an autonomous car has the choice of running over the baby or the grandmother, which one should it run over, which is a more ethical choice? And we had some really interesting conversations of what ethics means. And we had this, we basically had an ethics committee. 3 kids were the committee, and the rest of the class was basically the society. And we discussed, you know, why should we do things? Why should we not go to war? And we really understood how difficult some of these problems are for us to have an opinion and to partake in them. Those are the kids. So this is a pitch to our friends over at Kedge. I think Frank Spencer spoke earlier in the summit. If you want to get some training and certification, they have a certification program now, but they're really great organization, really great workshops and training. And they come from, you know, very experienced backgrounds. A few of them came from Disney. Yeah, so check it out. We also have a Vimeo page, vimeo.com/design futures initiative. All of our talks from Primer US from the last 2 years and Primer EU from the last 2 years are on that site. So if you want to check out some of the speakers that we've had. Books. People love this slide. They love to take pictures of the slide. These are just a few if you want to, you know, investigate what this foresight thing is, and futures and speculative design. Speculative everything is the one that we recommend if you're into speculative and critical design. There's lots of futurist books out there. Extrapolation Factory. This is Elliot Montgomery, who I think is speaking also at the summit, from Parsons, and really great manual. It's got a lot of frameworks in it. And then Bruce Tharp just came out with a book called Discursive Design, which is a very robust book on all kinds of projects throughout the years. It's kind of like a Bible. It's great. Some games. You know, when I was trying to really introduce this idea to GE, I would just have like a lunch and learn or brown bag and do these speculative games, and you know, just think about futures. And the thing from the future, I think, is it's a card game. I think you can print it out now on the internet. But these are other ways that you can teach people. So I'm going to end on this. Futures for All is our theme. It was the theme for the conference last year, but we love it and we've adopted it. And this is really this is embedded in everything we do. We're trying to be very inclusive. We're trying to provide a platform for people. You know, sometimes we get scrutinized for not being Futures for All because we've forgotten something, but you know, we're trying. And you know, we are a nonprofit is a nonprofit. We're not profiting, but it is a business, and so we're trying to figure out how do we, you know, keep it sustainable. We have an amazing team of people who volunteer their time every day and very passionate about this. I can't thank them enough, and there's a lot of work ahead to try and help connect the community. And you know, we hope you'll join us at one of the meetups, or you'll start a chapter, or you know, come in. We have a Slack channel. If you go to futures.design, and in the footer there's a join link for our Slack channel. Come and start a conversation, and let's work together. One last note, you know, throughout this crisis, I've been sort of struggling to figure out how do we do more and activate and empower people, and not just add to the noise or add to the anxiety. And we're trying to come up with other creative ways for how do we do this. And we've been doing these open forums, just basically turning on a Zoom conference for different regions of the world and just saying, hey, come in and talk and, you know, vent or talk about possibilities, whatever you want to do. And they've been really fun. We did one for Latin America. We did one for Asia this morning. I had to get up very early. And it's great. I mean, that's cheap, free, and easy for us to provide. But we want to do more. And I'm trying to figure out how can we do more. And so I hope that you all will think about that too. I know we're sort of confined to our lockdown, and we have to be very responsible, but I think we can do more to help us, help people get through this and pave the way for the new chapter that we're going to be emerging into or reintegrating into. That's all. Thank you very much. So let me figure out how to do this. I know there's like questions, but I haven't been able to. So I can't hear anything. It's kind of weird because I can't hear any voices, and I'm just sort of just talking, and it's very silent. So I hope I was clear. How are we on time? Okay, we've got some time. I'm going to go through the Q&A. How do I answer live? How do I do this? I would like to answer this question live. Sorry, I don't know what I just did, but I'll answer the first one. How do you see the arts helping create a new language or opening a dialogue on how to approach the future? What role can it play? How do you see collaboration between the arts and other industries that are more data-driven? You know, I hate to relegate the arts with just creativity and design, but sometimes that's what people think speculative design is. It's art. It's just like a concept. It's artistic, but design in general has that dimension to it. The arts are definitely a factor. You know, we have an exhibition every year at Primer to showcase student work and other projects to just kind of make it visible and have people interact with it. But I think they can play a major role. And I think we sort of suffer from this like division between like there's the art stuff and there's like business stuff, and they don't necessarily play well together, but they do. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. Does the speculative design community collectively tackle planned obsolescence, or did planned obsolescence already become an integral part of speculative design in order to be commercially successful? Planned obsolescence. It can. I mean, I don't think that speculative design, I don't think that we as a community are focusing on that as a topic, but it's definitely fair game. There are things that will become obsolete. And I think that's a factor that we should start to think about, especially with like, you know, the environment and just sustainability. But it's definitely a factor that we should be considering when we're thinking about futures. I'm not sure if that's a great answer, if I've answered that properly. How exactly does this line of work influence strategic planning and resources allocation in your org? in my nonprofit. So we're constantly trying to use Futures to understand what we should do. When the crisis hit, we basically, the team did a whole, foresight and Futures exercise to figure out what are the possibilities here and to try and plan for different scenarios. And we have a couple of different options and things that we can turn on and off. And, we really have practiced what we preach with what we're doing. And we're constantly trying to use that in our strategy work. Is it still design, or is it the experience people have in the workshops that's the outcome? I'm sorry, I don't totally understand that question. Is it still design, or is it the experience people have in workshops that's the outcome? Oh, well, in workshops, there's a lot of, you can do a lot of speculative workshops, and they're very useful to teach people frameworks and how to do it. But the hard part is you create all these really great ideas, but how do you execute on them and make them, tangible, or like actually make them North Stars? And you have to take that back. You've got to have some sort of investment into it. So it is still design. Any Futures workshop still has this design element. You're coming up with a scenario or an artifact or some sort of provocation. You're designing this based on data. But the challenge is always like, how do we use that to create a new strategy and actually build towards it? And that's the challenge that we're having today, is getting people invested in it. And there's a number of different ways you can get companies or leadership to invest in things. And I always say, just like, try to use a common language, simple vocabulary, and talk about the things that they care about. Looks like a thinking school first, then you apply classical design like graphics, movie, product. Yes, that's true. It is sort of like a thinking school first. I mean, everything is based on research and understanding what's the state of the world that we think we're moving into, so that we can create those responses. Where is the extended impact and position in society of speculative design? What role will it play? And what is the future of futurism? That's a hard question. I don't know what the impact is. I'm hoping that, unfortunately, we go through these very traumatic events in the world that kind of wake people up to the idea of strategic planning and long-term thinking. And hopefully we'll be able to make use of this stuff a lot more now. So yeah, I mean, for those of you who are practitioners, I hope that people are, you're finding a place to apply it to help us figure out how do we plan for post-COVID. I don't know the future of futurism. I'm really hoping that it will become a normal thing. We won't have to talk about it anymore. It'll be just like design. It'll be embedded in design. It'll just be a thing that you have to do. Please put your contact back up. Okay, sorry. Okay. Book slides. Here's my contact information. Book slides. Hope you can see that. Which approach would you think would be best to imagine what the post-crisis normal would be like? I can't tell you what the best approach is. I think all these approaches will be useful for building the new world, understanding the implications of the crisis on our society, our interactions, all that stuff. I think you can employ all of them. It just depends on what you're focusing on. Do you use speculative design in your daily work as a tool? How do you market that in projects? So I try to be future oriented and strategic, and always think about, be pessimistic and optimistic, think about challenges and risks, but I don't ever call it, speculative design. We just call it visioning, because we're still working on trying to get those terms adopted in, the regular workplace. It's not like design thinking. Design thinking is a very well-known concept. It's sort of like when service design came around, like, 15 years ago. We're sort of in that very first stages of people just hearing about it and trying to understand it. But we have to be careful about how we use it and what we call it. The examples are mostly physical products. Are there cases in service or strategic design? Yes, of course there are. There's definitely ecosystems. Anything, speculative design can be services, they can be ecosystems of products, they can be physical products, digital products, it doesn't matter. I just chose to show you a couple of those things. What are the most important differences you identify on children who have been exposed to these methodologies from those who don't? Well, it's a new way of thinking for them, and it's a fun way. We sort of like, when we do these workshops, they have a lot of fun, and it's an imagination game. They're learning a little bit, and we're never going to we can't really measure it because we have to wait for the future to arrive to see if we've actually impacted them and changed their way of thinking about things. But I think they like it, and I'm hoping, we haven't done enough work in it. We're still trying to we're not experts in this field at all, so we're experimenting and trying to figure out how applicable it is and how scalable it can be. But all I can say is they enjoy it, they have fun, they're able to repeat things that we want them to learn without being prompted, so it's been useful. How could bring speculative design inside the architectural world and interior design? Well, speculative design has been part of the architectural world for many years. It's actually very well accepted and a part of the architectural process, and way ahead of design. So it's already embedded in their theory and discipline. So they're pretty lucky. How do you train your imagination in order to extend the capacity to observe weak signals? It's not necessarily about training the imagination. It's about just being observant and seeing things and basically, basing them on patterns, things things you've seen in history. I definitely don't always know where to look for signals, but I have, I'm constantly reading things and posting things on our social media and our Facebook group to sort of provoke people. Also just post like current news and events and things that might be things you want to speculate on, emerging technologies, whatever it might be. So it kind of depends on your interests. I'm in a digital world, so I'm always looking at what are new emerging technologies or interactions that we're going to have to design for. So those are things that I focus on. So I don't really have a good answer for how to train. You just have to do it a lot. How would you start to introduce speculative design to organization and make it relevant? Yeah, like I said, you have to be careful around the vocabulary. Use terms like strategy and visioning. Design fiction and speculation are sort of not very saleable terms because it feels fake to people. So we're calling it strategy. Futures or foresight also. But I would start by like doing games or doing a newsletter or doing a workshop and introducing people internally to it, designers or people who you think would gravitate towards it easier, and then trying to socialize it in other ways, publishing stuff internally, doing talks internally, and just kind of introducing people to the methodologies. What is the first reaction of people when you talk about futures? I am mean people who are not familiar to that topic, how to start to discuss about the topic in a team. People love it because it's very like, it's science fiction. We talk about ethics and impact, and we're talking about like really like societal level things. So people understand it very quickly that it can be useful to identify these really important things that we don't normally think about. But the hard part is, once they're bought into it, like how do they actually, how do we get work? How do we do the work and get people to get clients to pay us for it or get our company to invest in it when there's no like immediate ROI? So you have to be, everyone that discovers it loves it, but it's always a question of like, well, how do we market it and sell it? You share a contact page again.
I'm sorry, Phil, we only have time for one more question.
Okay. Abraham de la Rosa, how would you incorporate futures thinking into a service design project for a company? Would you incorporate it before or after the overall service design thinking process? Well, if you're doing a service design project and you're looking at the future of a service, then it should be right there. Typically, we think we just do design thinking, and you can do a design thinking project and say, hey, this is just in the future. But if you employ some of these frameworks for how do you really think about what the future world is like, use trends, use data, use these frameworks to really understand the world, it'll make it more robust. It'll make your service more meaningful. And yeah, and you sort of have to smuggle it into the design process. You don't have to say like, oh, now we're doing the future stuff, but you can use it as part of a way of crafting what that service is. And it can be very useful. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but look up some of these frameworks, and if you're working on that project, just bring it in and try to, the hardest part is making people understand and believe that when you're designing for the future, it's a different world from today. And you have to build all the rules and really put them there for them to believe that that's what could happen. And here's a design response. And they'll believe the design response more once they believe all the other aspects of that world, the trends and all that stuff. All right. Thanks, guys. Great questions. I hope I answered them.